Authorities in Cross River State have launched an investigation after a police officer, Inspector Effiong Bassey, allegedly ran amok and killed 3 persons while injuring several others at the Atakpa Divisional Police Headquarters in Calabar. The incident, which occurred before 6 a.m. on Sunday, caused widespread panic near the popular Watts Market. Now, according to a statement by the Police Public Relations Officer Superintendent Effiong Bassey, who had just returned from a night duty at a Kondo Microfinance Bank, exhibited erratic behavior, refused to surrender his AK-47 rifle and blocked the station's gate before opening fire on bystanders. 3 people were killed, including 41-year-old Ijoma Wilson Obot, while others, including Charles Nkpang, sustained injuries and are receiving medical treatment. Bassey was eventually subdued, disarmed, and taken into custody. The Assistant Inspector General of Police Zone 6, Mohammed Bala, alongside the Cross River State Command Management Team, visited the injured victims at the hospital. Authorities have assured the public of a thorough investigation while urging calm as they engage with community stakeholders to de-escalate tensions. Again, another erratic shooting. Sadly, unexpected, undue loss of life, as it were. What are your thoughts on this report?
It's terrible. This is a wake-up call to the authorities, the police authorities, and maybe all public authorities or those in position of authority in public life. The initial reports alluded that there was a possibility of an unstable mind at work. Probably the guy has lost it mentally. So this calls to question. These are men who handle weapons. These are men who, as it were, should make rational decisions. They are confronted with situations that require rational decisions at every point in time in the course of their work. The question is, what is their state of mind? You see, we can't, when people talk about mental health and all those stuff, we can't take some things for granted again. I know the average Nigerian, when you suggest a medical check in line with mental health, is like, are you saying I'm mad or something? Beyond that, nobody says anybody is mad. But the situation we have across the world, in Nigeria in particular, is that many people are under pressure. This is not pressure. This is not about substance abuse or something like that. No, when people are under pressure, economic pressure, social pressure, family pressure, and these things have a way of triggering a mental situation, a mental breakdown. So, like I said, it calls for question. What does the authorities do, or what do the authorities do to ascertain that these men are always at their best form at every time, especially before they are sent out into the public? Yeah. You can imagine if this man were at a traffic checkpoint or had even been sent to maybe arrest some people or quell a riot or something, and he's in this state of mind. You can imagine what would happen. And in that case, let's say in the case of quelling a riot, nobody would even relate it to mental state. It would look like, maybe he was trying to dispel a violent protest or gathering, not knowing that something bigger than him has taken over him. So it raises questions. Shouldn't we do more? Shouldn't we think of having a periodic mental check? And beyond the periodic mental check, maybe at the point of recruitment, and periodic check maybe beginning of the year and all those things. Before each shift, shouldn't there be a health analysis, as it were? Do they have 2 bus stocks? What should be included in that 2 bus stock? What should be used to ascertain their mental health before letting them out to the public?
No, you have come through with lots of salient points as regards the effectiveness of regular mental checks for security personnel, especially because they wield weapons, and which can result in fatal casualties if they are not fit to wield those weapons. Now, I want to gather your thoughts as regard, because we have had numerous reports on, police officers, as it were, security personnel shooting periodically at a crowd of people. The reports we took last week had a police officer that was drunk at a site where they sell local alcohol, and he had a weapon on. Given that we have had all of this, right, and you did rightly talk about a system where these periodic checks should go on. Now, do you even think these checks are done before people get into the police force, on one hand? Now, you recommended periodic checks. If periodic checks are done, you listed a lot of, challenges that can lead people to stress: cost of living, the inflation. Some of these people have children. So oftentimes complaints have been brought to the media as regards the state of the residents of some of these police officers, and sometimes, for most of the time, it hasn't looked really good. Now, they have the issue with, sometimes they don't even have water. Now, all of these concerns, as it were, do you think if periodic checks alone are done, and the concerns, or what stems out of the periodic check in regard remuneration, how much are they paid, should they be increased? Because you want these people working in full capacity, you want their mental health stable. And part of what causes the stress, like, the things you listed, you did talk about financial problems, which will wield in, as it were, to any living person, many other levels of stress. If you cannot afford to send your children to school, you're stressed. If you cannot afford to, buy food at home, even as a single person, right? If you're not able to pay your rent, you're stressed. What are your thoughts as regards remuneration and a form of settlement where these people are happier when they are living in their houses, and then the medical checks you recommended?
You see, when we talk about this type of check, a system that is desirous of providing solution and doing this check for the sake of providing answers and not just a mere bureaucratic requirement, should go all out, should go the whole hog. If you want to really do this type of test, the medical are part of it, but the people would be spoken with to know, what are the possible challenges they are likely to face. And without even asking some of these people, some of the challenges can be seen by the authorities.
Right.
For example, their living quarters. These are the things that are likely to trigger, unstable mind and all those things. First, the living quarters are inadequate, and where they are provided, they are not in the best state they should be. If you are seeing some of our, some of the quarters, workers' quarters, when they were built, they were fantastic. But over the years, the general
is that a problem with the people, with the personnel that live there, not being able to maintain it, or is a problem of, the agency, as it were, the...
It could be both. It
Okay.
could be both.
Okay.
For example, there are some of those maintenance that goes beyond the individual.
Okay.
Structural maintenance and all that, drainage may not be for the individual officer or even personnel, whatever kind of personnel it is living in a quarter.
Right.
To maintain. So a system should have a work department, as it were, where they can make these reports to, and have, beyond the report, ensure that the changes are effected. And even the ones that, the maintenance that seem to fall on the individual to maintain, there's a way the system can also make the individual do it. For example, if you have rules that, those who live upstairs, nobody throws refuse, or no matter how small, even if it's a pack of sweets, candy and others, you don't want to see things thrown, and you monitor it. You would have helped those people put up a minimum hygienic level. Yeah. If you say it is the duty of the residents of a particular quarter to, for example, keep his his toilet and other sanitary stuff clean,
Right.
and there is no water in that quarters, it's going to be much more difficult to maintain a good sanitary system. But if you provide water, it becomes easier to maintain. And you know, when we talk about things like water, these are things that should come natural. Ideally, I shouldn't be moving into a house and be wondering if there is water there or not. But sadly, in Nigeria today, you still ask that question.
All right.
Is there water there? Is the water steady? Because indeed, there are places you move into and there are no water. In fact, most of the places you have stable water are self-help projects, individuals doing boreholes and all that. But for the guy who lives in such quarters, he can't live there and dug his own borehole. So it's a holistic thing. There is the role for the individual resident. There's also a role.
But then
for
again,
the
part of water, shouldn't it be factored in to the building plan?
It should. What ought to be and what is. This is what ought to be. But what is, at times, in many cases, are different from what ought to be. Yes, it ought to be that in this design, there is a plan for water. It ought to be that in this design, there is a plan for cleaning the environment. It ought to be that in this design, there is a plan for recreation.
Right.
That's another thing that is missing in some of these quarters where there exist recreational facilities. It ought to be. But in reality, do we have them? Even when initially, as it ought to be, they have been, embedded in the system, they were really built when the places were built. How long do they go after the time of building? For example, a lawn tennis court built in a particular quarter 20-30 years ago may have been out of use now.
Right.
If there is no if there have been no servicing and maintenance over the year. So you cannot look back 30 years and say, oh, we provided a tennis court or a football field or something, and it has not been maintained. And like I said, some of these things goes beyond the individual residents to maintain. So it should be a system thing. The system should have. So these are the things that are likely where they are living quarters to trigger issues. That what kind of quarters do they live in? And most of those men, especially those even moving on transfer, have no accommodation. Like you said earlier, these are things, rent. If you have no accommodation, issues like rent, because they get no concession in society. They pay the same rent every other person pay. Rightly so too. So how do they cope with this? These are the things the system can look into. When you even talk about increasing their wage, is it just increasing it for the sake of it, or increasing it to a living wage that can really meet some substantial needs?
All right, thank you so much.